I think there is a time now for questions, answers, your own voices. Father Hieronym is the one walking with microphone. Okay, we have already first question. I had one prepared, but okay. I mean, everyone can ask question in Polish or in English.
Papieski Wydział Teologiczny we Wrocławiu, Jan Klinkowski. Taka refleksja i troszkę będzie pytanie do pana rabina. Kiedy spoglądamy na samym początku budowania drogi chrześcijańskiej, to my jesteśmy po prostu częścią judaizmu. Czyli jesteśmy jedną z dróg judaizmu. Mamy drogę faryzejską, sadyceusze, eseńczycy, rodzi się ruch zelocki. I w dużej mierze świat zewnętrzny odczytuje nas jako część judaizmu. Doświadczamy tych samych problemów, które doświadczał także judaizm, czyli problemów, które wynikały z faktu, że w ramach Wielkiego Imperium Rzymskiego pojawiło się wiele nurtów, a może główny nurt, który był związany z dworem cesarskim Tyberiusza, jego doradcy Sejana, bardzo kreujący politykę antyżydowską w Imperium Rzymskim. I w to wpisuje się też i wydarzenia procesu Jezusa, ale także i wpisuje się fakt, że te pierwsze doświadczenia prześladowania były wspólne. Jeśli weźmiemy 38 rok w Aleksandrii, to przecież nas nikt nie odróżniał od środowiska, które było. Jedna dzielnica była całkowicie zamieszkała przez Żydów, może w drugiej czy trzeciej dzielnicy było nas też dosyć sporo. I wtedy te prześladowania dotknęły nas wszystkich. Te pierwsze przepowiednie, które tam się pojawiły, te apokaliptyczne, wydaje się, że były pocieszeniem wspólnym. Czyli zwracaliśmy się wszyscy do Boga, żeby otrzymać pomoc w tych trudnych sytuacjach. Pójdę dalej, nie wnikając już dalej w szczegóły, że nie wiem, czy pan Rami się z tym zgodzi, czy pierwsi męczennicy chrześcijańscy w jakim stopniu byli także wpisani w judaizm, bo przecież Paweł czy Piotr, którzy ginęli w Rzymie, ginęli w tej atmosferze rzymskiego negatywnego odniesienia do wspólnoty judaistycznej, a jeszcze do końca nas nie odróżniano wewnętrznie. Czyli z zewnątrz patrząc, byliśmy częścią judaizmu. Na ile częścią judaizmu jeszcze jesteśmy, doświadczyłem w kościele etiopskim. Kiedy przybyłem do Etiopii, pierwsze moje wizyty przed laty, wielokrotnie odwiedzałem Etiopię w takim kościele Debre Libanos, to jeden z głównych kościołów Etiopii. Wtedy kapłan wyszedł i dał mi na kartce: jeśli współżyłem z kobietą ostatniej nocy, nie powinienem wejść do kościoła, bo mi obowiązują przepisy rytualne. I osobno leżała kartka przeznaczona dla kobiet. Jeśli kobieta ma okres, to też nie może wejść do kościoła. Wiele tych wspólnych zwyczajów pozostało, czyli pierwszy jest obrzezanie, a później jest przyjmowany chrzest. W kościele etiopskim Eucharystię odprawia się na tabocie, czyli stawia się tablice kamienne dekalogu na ołtarzu i właściwie nie ma kościoła bez dekalogu i na dekalogu sprawuje się dopiero Eucharystię. Ten związek zatem jest widoczny i wydaje mi się, że bardzo mało się mówi o tej wspólnocie pierwszych chrześcijan z poszczególnymi nurtami judaizmu i że to był początek, w którym wyrastaliśmy jako chrześcijanie, rodząc się we wspólnocie judaizmu. Więc może pytanie do pana rabina, na ile to z zewnątrz oddziaływanie świata rzymskiego może być traktowane jako pewna forma wyjaśnienia tych ewentualnie problemów we wspólnocie judaizmu i napięć między chrześcijanami a judaizmem podsycanymi albo nawet prowokowanymi przez władzę rzymską.
Dziękujemy. Mikrofon może już iść do profesora Grossfelda. Rabbi, can you answer?
Do I need to turn this on? Is this working? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you for that question. I think I spent a good deal of my graduate program trying to unpack some of that. But I think there are a few things. Certainly in terms of aspects of Jewish tradition or Jewish practice that became translated or taken up by various parts of the church as it is emerging, it is certainly something it certainly is one of the places where there is an overlap and there is a shared heritage. In terms of the in terms of the Jews' position in the Roman Empire, there you have the idea that the Romans viewed Jews as a legal religion, as a licit religion. It was a permitted religion, and in many ways it was respected as being an ancient religion. Christianity, as it emerges under the Romans, was originally viewed not as a licit religion, but as a new religion. In many of the same ways, I think analogous ways today, that new religions are generally looked down upon both by religious authorities and often by political authorities. It was after the revolt against Rome that led to the destruction of the Second Temple, that at least the Jewish community in Judea, where there were certainly problems there, but Jewish communities in the diaspora did not really experience that same negativity. So I think it's really when you have the confluence of the emergence of the church and imperial power. We can pick Constantine if we want to, have a example of when that happens. When the church becomes empire, at that point is really when you start to see the church sort of distinguishing itself, separating itself from the Jews, and really starting to see the Jews as others. In terms of how the Jewish community, I think, views broadly the Christian world today, a lot of that is through the lens of history, and much of that history has, again, as I mentioned earlier, has been tragic, and that has made it very difficult for I think for many in the Jewish community to even be willing to look at where are those points of contact. So I'm just making sure that even the question, the martyrdoms of Paul or of Peter, I think were not based on their Jewish identity, but rather on their preaching and teaching of this new tradition, which the Roman authorities saw as something that was going to be unsettling to the society. What the Romans really wanted was peace, quiet, and taxes, right? and am I right? So anything that's going to cause dissent, and by the way, this is, I think, also helps explain, for example, statements like render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's. Let me leave it at that.
Okay. I appeal for short questions and short answers. Here there's 160 or 170 people there. Okay, Professor Grossfeld. Short question or reflection.
One general, jedna ogólna uwaga i dwa pytania. Czy w tytuł Dreams, marzenia o przyszłości po polsku nie jest zwodniczy? Dlatego, że jednak, sam autokrytykę tutaj składam w imieniu komitetu, ponieważ nie jest słowo marzenia, raczej nie mieści się w pewnej tradycji żydowskiej i chrześcijańskiej. Im bardziej jesteśmy zakorzenieni w słowie i w tym, co nazywamy rozpoznanie, rozróżnianie, tym bardziej odchodzimy od pewnych marzeń, bo nie opieramy się na marzeniu, ale ewentualnie na tym drugim znaczeniu słowa dream, czyli śnie Jakuba, o którym mówił biskup Weto. To nie jest to samo, a po polsku słowo marzenia brzmi niedobrze. Pytanie do pana rabina. Użył pan kilka razy słowo Holokaust. No, wydaje się, że to słowo jest dosyć przerażające i używane powszechnie i w Watykanie, i przez Żydów religijnych, niereligijnych, w dialogu i przez wrogów i tak dalej. Czy nie uważa pan rabin, że to słowo jednak powinno zniknąć, ponieważ oznacza ofiarę całopalną, której ani nikt nie składał, ani nikt tą ofiarą nie był. Dla mnie to jest sformułowanie straszne. Pytanie do księdza biskupa. Tutaj mamy jedno drzewo na tym ogólnym afiszu. W prezentacji księdza biskupa były te dwa drzewa, połączone tylko na dole jedną cienką, podskórną, podziemną nitką. Czy nie myśli ksiądz biskup, że to jest dosyć pesymistyczny obraz tych dwóch drzew i połączenie tylko w podziemiu tą cienką stróżką wody? Czy nie jest bardziej przemawiające słowo z psalmu, które mówi, z psalmu 1, o człowieku szczęśliwym, który będzie jak drzewo zasadzone nad płynącą wodą. Jest to jednak na koniec jest to zawsze jakieś jedno drzewo. Pytanie, ja nie wiem, nie mam tutaj rozeznania dobrego, ale wydaje mi się, że to albo ten rysunek z tymi dwoma drzewami dotyczy innego czasu niż dzisiejszy, na pewno inny niż przyszły, którym ma być według Żydów i według chrześcijan jakaś jedna religia, jak mówi nasz umiłowany rabin Boaz Pasz. Czy też nie lepsze jest drzewo, które ma rozmaite, nie wiem jak to powiedzieć, bo na końcu wyrastamy z jednego, ten pień jest gdzieś głębszy i jest boski. Boży.
Okay, I think we will start with the Bishop Etienne because we need to let Rabbi a little bit rest here. So, Bishop Etienne, please.
As far as the tree is concerned, I find it's a very interesting question, and I'd like to keep on working on it. But it's true that the way I was trying to picture it, all images, all pictures fall short of the reality we're trying to picture. But the way I was trying to picture it is that these were the nations that were still called to come and be grafted, that were not grafted yet, that had a certain relationship, but though that in the end, in a mysterious way, there will be one tree, in the way I thought. And so these were the nations that were still to be grafted. But I do agree that it only works if there is something divine in the root itself or in the trunk itself. Okay, this can... I'm going to dive into Christology, high Christology. I believe that Jesus should be understood as a member of the Jewish people, a single member of the Jewish people, as the historical Jesus, or rather, Jesus who was historically with us. But we see that in Paul's letters, Jesus is, as Christ, is also a cosmic reality that precedes. And that in a certain mysterious way, everything, the whole of creation, is in Jesus. Now, I know this is completely impalatable from a Jewish point of view, or impossible, except if we say that all is in the eternal Torah, and that I'm not saying it's the same thing, but we can use an analogy that it would be like. But so I do believe that we also need to think as Christ as preceding every aspect of history, and in this case, in a certain way. I'm sorry, I'm trying to put all Christology in 2 minutes. We are familiar with Jesus as during his 30 years, his historical 30 years, where there's the risen Lord who encompasses also everything, the whole of creation. I do believe that there is also an aspect of Christ that precedes everything and that englobes everything. And in this case, it would truly be the root. Everything is one, and everything is rooted inside this. But I've had to go very far. I just wanted to say something about the dreams. Yes, I agree, but I like the word dream, even if it's not exactly the Jewish Christian meaning, because dreams in many different traditions have a very strong power. They are a place to imagine the future. They're places without time and space where we can think outside of the box. In the Greek tradition, Aesop, for example, they were places of healing. You were healed, and it's good to dream together, to heal together. And one kind of dream is this dream for which there is another word in Polish. There's another word in French too to say this is songe. I don't. Yeah.
Rabbi.
So yes, I don't like the word Holocaust either. First of all, it is a translation of the Hebrew word for a whole offering that was completely burnt on the altar. So I do not believe that the Jews or anybody else who perished as part of the Nazi final solution, these were not sacrifices to God. There was nothing sacred about it. The other thing that I would say, I'm sorry, I get a little bit emotional when I talk about this, is that those offerings were completely burnt. They were completely consumed, and we are still here. We were not completely consumed. So, you know, I think that's an important distinction. Furthermore, I do prefer the word Shoah. I prefer the word Shoah because that is unique to the experience of Jews and during the Second World War. And the word Holocaust can, and perhaps rightly, be applied to other atrocities. And again, I want to be careful here because to say that the Shoah of the Jews is unique is not in any way to diminish the tragedies that others have experienced. So I think that's another point as well. One word about dream. I might, instead of the word dream, have used hope. And in this regard, I think of the phrase, and I'm forgetting for a moment which prophet, excuse me, I hope my teachers are not listening in, but Asirei Tikva, we are prisoners of hope. In these days, when we look around at our world, it is easy to give up hope, but I continue to feel caught by hope. I refuse to give up hope.
Okay, the last question. The last one. You were first.
Thank you, Your Eminence. This is a question for Rabbi Sandmel. I'm here from the U.S. as an artist coming with a driving goal to memorialize Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel here in Poland, who it appears he's being forgotten in his own country. And the wonderful thing being invited to this Nostra Aetate meeting is that Rabbi Heschel took a delegation in the 60s to the Vatican and modified 2 tenets, which was an amazing achievement. And he came to Hebrew Union College in 1940, and then he went to the Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan. And I wondered if your father knew him, and I wonder how his genius writing, which for me as a Christian absolutely put a rock-solid foundation of great inspiration for me, and that his writing went among Jews, but also all over the world to Christians. So my question is to you, what does he mean in your life, if at all? Because I know some great Jews do not know much about him, but I love him so much, and that's why I'm here in Poland.
Well, so the first time I met Susanna Heschel, we compared notes on being the children of rabbis who had been sort of pioneers in this instance, and Heschel. I won't call him a prophet, but he speaks prophetically. His language and his writing has the poetry, has the power, and has the inspiration of that we see in the prophets. And he had incredible courage. I think the courage to say, as he, that he would prefer to go to the gas chamber, than to give up his tradition is really very moving and brave and had a significant effect, right? And I also have this image of Rabbi Heschel, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Maurice Eisendrath, by the way, who was then the president of the Union Reform Judaism, carrying a Torah scroll, marching together. And he said that he felt as if his feet were praying. And I think about that. Now I'm going to be really revealing. I thought about that last weekend when I went to the No Kings March in my community. That I was following in his footsteps. So I think that I have the greatest respect for Heschel, and I applaud the work that you're doing, and I hope that both his writings and his personal example will continue to have a wider and wider influence.
Thank you very much. I have to be cruel for a moment. But I think that the first part of our working session came to the end. We have had the next part, and it will be also a working part, so we need to eat something. But what I want to say at the end, just two things. One for Professor Grossfeld. Do not be anti-papal. Because the last question Francis used to ask was, what's the dream? What's the dream? That's a beautiful question. No, I'm joking, you know. We know each other too long. But the question about dream, what's the dream? It is an important question. Yeah, what's the dream? But yeah, okay. But the special word for Rabbi, you said that the Christian-Jewish dialogue for you is necessary. That this is something really, really important, that it is necessary for you. Because, for instance, when you look at the bishop saying at the left side, Bishop Cześlar, he's Lutheran bishop, and I like to listen to him, not because he's clever, but I like to listen to him because I believe that Holy Spirit speaks through him. And I think he listens sometimes to me also not because I am clever, but he believes that there is an exchange of spiritual gifts between us and between the churches. So when you say that this dialogue is necessary for you, that means that you are open for the exchange of God's gifts in two communities somehow united. So this is very important because part of the Hershey in Poland, I don't think so only in Poland, is that, the church made a big conversion and changes, but what are the changes on the Jewish side? Yeah? But what you said today, that you find this dialogue necessary for you, for me was probably the most important thing I heard. Thank you very much.